So, hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. Nice to have you with us. It's a sunshiny day, beautiful day
Mm.
in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, here in the Appalachian Mountains, where the Arlington Institute holds forth, and that's where we're coming to you from. And this is Quartet, our fortnightly deep dive into these big issues that are related to the dramatic change that we're all seeing in the world. And I'm pleased to have with us today Penny Kelly. Hi, Penny. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. It's good to be back. I missed you guys.
Yeah, Frank Jacob coming out to us from Germany. Hi, Frank.
How you doing, John? Hi, Penny. Good to see you're back with us again.
Yeah.
Back for the trio. I guess we should start calling it trio or something.
It's a trio today because Greg Braden is out in somewhere in Navajo land with no internet, and he can't be with us, but he'll be here next time again.
Right.
But thank you all for being here, and thank all of you who are our viewers. And we will be talking about what is enlightenment here today. And so stay with us. This is going to be interesting, I'm sure. And so let's start as we always do by running around the table and saying what's on your mind. Frank, what have you been thinking about?
Well, I've been kind of watching a little bit of the solar activity. It's interesting. There's a massive sunspot on the front, which, if you're familiar with these kinds of things, and I got used to sort of viewing them every now and then because of working with our biophysicist, German friend Dieter Brers. He's obsessed with the sun. But you find out that these sunspots have a direct correlation to Earth movements, right? So, there's a speculation or there's these warning signs out there for people who are in earthquake prone zones to watch out because it's the perfect kind of, or the similar sort of energetic signature as one that passed recently, which triggered like a level 7+ or 8+ earthquake. So that's been interesting. And the other thing I just ran across a headline also that every now and then I do pay attention to the media, So I saw this headline: Robert Kennedy Jr. now says we'll know the cause of autism by September, right? And I was just thinking, this is a pile of dog doo-doo, if you ask me. It's like it's like that claim he made about we're going to fix geoengineering in 21 states when the problem is national, and if you really want to fix it, you may have to shut down the entire air traffic system on the whole planet, right? So this to me, those kinds of statements are like proof that it's kind of what you always expect, from controlled opposition. Someone is sent in to keep everyone who doesn't do any serious research appeased and think that something's actually happening to solve that problem. But it's not because, autism, for people who don't know, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but if you do some research, you find out it's kind of become like a catch-all label, like got a really vague umbrella term for a whole wide range of health issues. And if you look up in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DMS as they call it, which is the psychiatry industry's go-to Bible, it's just a checklist of behaviors. And some of those behaviors could be caused by dozens of factors, like exposure to toxic pesticides, nanoparticles in the sky, floating down to Earth and landing in our water and food supply, harmful medications, vaccine reactions, trauma from abuse, brain injuries, chemicals in our food, etc., etc. So you realize, like, these are not mysteries. We've known this stuff for a long time, so we don't need another massive global study to confirm what's already in front of us. So this kind of stuff really, I don't know about you guys, but it kind of bothers me. We need to stop pretending that this one size fits all label will explain everything when it's actually just masking deeper and often really tragic realities behind, children stories, for example. And it's interesting to watch how many people are falling for it. Other than that, though, I've been trying to get out into nature more, and get into connecting with the everything's coming up green here, so it's a great time to be outside. And I'm working on another webinar, which is really exciting stuff. So over to you.
Good. We'll learn more about that later, I'm sure. Penny, what are you thinking about?
Oh, several things have really caught my attention and held it. really seriously. I think probably the biggest one, which is the most recent, is that Trump is saying he's stepping back from Ukraine. I think that's today or tomorrow. And I'm looking at the fallout that will occur in Europe from that. It's like, holy cow. And in my recent look-see, I saw him stepping back. I thought he was stepping back from Israel. And I was wondering this morning if he's stepping back from Europe as the first step and will step back from Israel as the second step. And that's going to change the dynamics of everything over in your part of the world, Frank. So that has been, Europe is having a rough time, and it's going to get a little rougher over there. The second thing is the death of the Pope. I had seen a huge reorganization at the top of the power pile, and that he's almost at the top. I think there's a small triumvirate that is controlling the whole planet in a kind of sneaky way. It's the cabal. But the Pope is involved in that, and there's a big reorganization that I see coming as part of the fallout from that death. And then I watched some of the fighting in Yemen, and some of the descriptions of the weaponry is like, oh my God. Okay, we are at war. It's just not here yet. Hopefully it won't come here. And the last thing has been the effort of Robert Kennedy to shift health. And what I see as fallout from that is, and I see little signs of it already, that there has been all sorts of solutions for things like the autism you were talking about, Frank, cancers, all kinds of problems like diabetes, kidney failure, heart disease, you name it. But those things have been kept under wraps. And with RFK coming out and saying, we're doing this and we're doing that, and people are becoming more health conscious, and I'm still teaching my Getting Well Naturally class, and people are still signing up for that. What I see is that because all this stuff has been kept under wraps, Big Pharma is now under pressure to bring some of that out. And so they reported on CNN, because I too watch some of that crap, some of that stuff. Yeah, sorry about that. And they reported that there was a small cancer study in which they put out this stuff. I'm not sure that I can say it because I could barely hear what she was saying, but it's dostarlimab. That drug, whatever it is an immune function support of some sort, maybe. And it just, everybody's cancer in the entire study disappeared. Everybody. And I thought, oh, there it is. They're saying, wow, we're going to lose out if we don't get our drugs that we know how to fix these things with. If we don't get them out there, then things like BioShield and the burgeoning let's get healthy again movement is going to take over, and we're not going to have any demand for big pharma stuff. So so those are the things I've been watching, thinking, oh my gosh, everything's changing. Everything. Yeah.
Well, it is, and it's accelerating, and it'll continue to do that almost certainly for the foreseeable future, at least. So it's time for our topic today. And our topic is, here's the way I characterize it to our panel. What is the question is, what is enlightenment, and how might we know if we are enlightened? And, you get to this point, this is a term that's spread around a great deal. And, when I first started, early on, I start reading the book, the Ra books and the Law of One, that were these channeled books from multiple 3 years or something like that. And what they suggested was that there were regular times, a combination of kind of a cosmic configuration and the kind of readiness of the humans. And there was what they called a harvesting, and it would happen, and humans would be taken somewhere or done something with. But it was all about that you had a certain level of consciousness and enlightenment that would make it kind of possible for that to happen. And so there are, constant kind of indications that talk about and processes and workshops and books and everything that talk about consciousness and how you get there and what is and so on, and how neat, how it's the next natural kind of evolutionary jump for us. It's many times I've asked the question myself, and certainly I've heard it asked of others to say, what is enlightenment? How do you know? I mean, how do you know if you get there, if you're there? I've just had in the not distant future past somebody suggesting that they knew somebody that was particularly enlightened, and you say, well, what does that mean? Dr. George King, who is this extraordinary kind of English avatar, says about enlightenment. He said, enlightenment is much harder to attain than many of us realize, and much greater than any of us can really imagine, unless we're already enlightened. He says it is a wonderful, glorious, and very holy state, far deeper and far more mystical than any just basic pizza mind or even advanced psychic vision. Well, that's saying that this is really something bigger than any of us kind of mostly think about when we think about enlightenment. And then Caitlin Johnstone, a wonderful writer from Australia, in her blog post today says that what's required of humans here is this need to both have this external change as well as internal awakening, and internal awakening. And she says, awakening inwardly means becoming fully conscious in the ways in which we have been deceiving ourselves. Doing the inner work necessary to bring consciousness to the delusions and dysfunction within us, and discovering what's really true about our unquestioned assumptions regarding basic elements of our experience, like self and other time, space, thought, consciousness, and separation. Well, all of this kind of says maybe we don't fully understand what enlightenment was, or maybe we think enlightenment is something quite different than what it really needs to be. And so maybe we can start, Frank, with you and say, what do you think about what is enlightenment?
Well, that's a juicy question for sure. And I approach the question from the perspective of what I would call applied enlightenment, which is based on kind of a hybrid of Gnostic and Buddhist paths. And there's a reason for that. And there's something called the Bodhisattva, the path of the Bodhisattva. And I thought it might be, therefore, a good starting point to kind of go into the origins of that enlightenment idea itself. Like, where did it emerge? So my take is like this: if you trace early Buddhist teachings back to their origin, you start with Gautama, Siddhartha, the Buddha, the first, like the lone seeker. He was like the first, at least in recorded tradition, to pierce the veil of appearances and enter in what he called shunyata, the void, right? The place of nothingness. And that is also the all, the unconditioned, the source. And it also meant that with that realization, he broke the cycle of reincarnation. That's what's said. And so it's not just Isabella Green and David Icke who figured out how to escape the so-called trap of reincarnation and multiple lives, right? This goes back to like, what, 550 BC or something like that. And because of that, something other happened. Something very special actually emerged out of that from this time. And it was given a name called the Diamond Sutra. And it's based on a legend that there was an actual conversation, if I'm not mistaken, between the historical Buddha and one of his disciples, about how an enlightened being, what he would call a bodhisattva, should act in the world. And what came out of that discussion was the notion that a bodhisattva does not escape the world. He doesn't vanish into the void, and he doesn't dissolve into abstract unity. Like, for example, the Ra teachings claim we are all one, all is love and light, the infinite creator, yada, yada, the usual New Age babble, actually. No, he chooses to stay. And, she's the one who returns from the brink of the void to walk the world in compassion, committed to be there for all, I guess, sentient beings. This is what they call that developed into Mahayana Buddhism. And yes, women were also capable of reaching the void. But the bodhisattva idea actually developed much later. And because Buddhist scholars are still scratching their heads trying to figure out where did this suddenly appear, this Mahayana thing, because it sort of spoke against the soul void trip and disappearing. So I looked into where it came from, and here's where the historical and the spiritual record kind of aligns with the hypothesis that I've been exploring in my research. And a while back, I stumbled on a really powerful talk online called Dogs in the Rain, Chomping the Buddhism Bone, which addresses exactly this subject. You can look it up. I highly recommend it. And what you find out is that around 150 to 200 AD, when the first Buddhist monks and mystics began traveling westward, along the Silk Road, they encountered these telestai, these Gnostics, and not the later corrupted forms of Gnosticism that were framed by the church doctrine, but these true initiates of these mystery schools that we were talking about that would step into the organic light and have this communion with, planetary intelligence, particularly Sophia, and, who's dreaming the earth and their cosmology. So the Buddhist Gnostics and Gnostics meeting was kind of not just a blending of these teachings, it was almost like a mutual recognition. It's not widely known, but one might say that this was a convergence that was marked by sort of a mutual recognition. Both systems were grappling with the existential questions, what is enlightenment really, right? So the Gnostics at that time already understood that the material cosmos isn't something that needs to be escaped. It's, if anything, it needs to be healed and fulfilled. And that, one could pass through the void, but you would return to live in the world not as a victim of illusion, but as a conscious participant in a divine dream. And this is sort of going in the direction of that woman you just quoted, John. This isn't a simulation, but it's divinity impregnating material cymatically shaping the dusty complex plasma, if you want. And it's entirely reasonable to conclude that this bodhisattva ideal was born out of this meeting that was shaped between these two philosophies, the one embodied by Gnosis and their devotion to this planetary existence and their understanding of merit not as a religious currency, but as this joy of mutual thriving that results from being totally authentic. Exactly what that woman you quoted was talking about. Like, we find out that it's a universal idea which actually stretches across cultures. And so it affirms the fact that, yeah, the void is real, but so is the world. And enlightenment isn't an exit strategy. We're here intentionally. Very, very important point. And from this perspective of consciously staying in the world, we see that enlightenment isn't about escaping reality, but about seeing through pretenses. And this is where this Diamond Sutra comes in, because that's exactly the words they use. I think they had a word called laksana. And technically, we all live through pretenses we've adopted because ultimately we're these divine intelligences now living through material form. So all these postures, the masks, the self-generated stories that we use to operate in society, those are some of these pretenses. And some of them are totally useless, of course, and downright false. But here's the key. Not all pretenses are false. Some of them are what you might call of high merit. And it's these kinds which allow us to thrive, enjoy together with all the rest of us here on the planet. So an enlightened person wouldn't become passive. He or she would deliberately choose their pretenses because they've seen through the idea of wearing the pretenses, and they play with them then lovingly in order to create experiences that will uplift not only themselves but others too. So I'm always asking, what does it have to do with gnosis? Well, it turns out actually everything, because it's exact, at this exact moment when these Gnostics were speaking out against this rising salvationist, religion that was popping up, angelic hierarchies, demiurgic distortions, but they weren't nihilists who thought the world was a prison. That's a lie, that was spread about them. The world is not a mistake. So this is where the kind of thing fuses together. The idea of a living earth that we are part of, and that the person or the entity or the aeon in the case of the Gnostic lore that created this did it as a bold act of novelty, entering into her own experiment, which then became Earth, the anthropos, humanity. And she didn't fall in shame. She fell in love, actually, with the possibility, right? So we're not here born in sin or deficiency. We're born in dreaming the experiment of divine intelligence, which is implanted in us directly to basically to bridge spirit and matter. So true enlightenment, whether in the language of Buddha or Gnosis, is therefore not about vanishing into the void. I think that's a distortion. And, this fits kind of the mold of archontic simulation, which we've been talking about. Unfortunately, that's still very much alive in a lot of spiritual teachings that promise transcendence without embodiment, that you leave your body and you go somewhere better, right? Including, of course, the law of one in the raw material. So I'm a little kind of skeptical, or let's say critical of that material. That's my final point I want to go into. This law of one, what does it represent? It represents kind of a structured, almost bureaucratic cosmology. They have densities, they have councils, they have a logos. It's all one, but somehow there's still a hierarchy, and it's easy to see this as a facade, potentially, some kind of a cosmic management, possibly run by sophisticated archonic forces masquerading as a divine. The whole thing about 500 planets inhabited by 50 civilizations, the Council of Nine, the 24 guardians, adding up to 33, of course, one of those numbers, and the claim that Earth is quarantined. There it is again, right? That only the Council of Nine has the say. Who incidentally, by the way, where do they live? They live on Saturn, which happens to, by the way, be the headquarters or home base of the Archons. So these are all major red flags. And this harvesting of soul, like that word alone should trigger everyone's alarm bells. The idea of being harvested implies external agency with authority over your destiny as an individual person. Another one of these classic archontic signatures. Who benefits from the harvest? Is the system it feeds truly benevolent, or is it just another layer of control? Ra's language of harvesting soul, ascending levels in hierarchy reminds me a lot of this second generation theosophical stuff, teachings of Alice Bailey we talked about in one of our shows. I think even Ra talks about a violet ray, and that ideology, as we know, later actually morphed into the foundational philosophy behind the United Nations. They even have the same address of the actual United Nations of the publishing company, Lucis Trust. So it's very, very suspect to me, I must say, and it's nothing novel. It's these ideas have already been in the field a long, long time where people, when are people going to realize that many of these channeled things, they're just tapping into the same old rehashed theosophical hybrid sludge of the human subconscious that's undisciplined and unfocused. Sorry to put it so harshly, right? But I find it interesting that over and above this quarantine, which is so, again, implies sickness and filthiness and potential leak into the cosmos of, God forbid, some earthly disease, right? It's an idea based on the germ theory, which of course we know that's really accurate, right? So there's never, though, any talk of the planetary mother. There's never any sense of the earth as a divine habitat. There's no grounding in the beauty of presence. This law of one stuff may borrow from gnosis sometimes, but it offers a total synthetic view of the thing. So, Ra's popular because it promotes this idea that Earth is, yeah, a kind of school or a prison planet meant to be graduated from. But I no longer subscribe to that idea. I think that's a delusion. And this is merely an
I'm,
extension of this slave species that kind of robs us of our internal divine intelligence. Let's not forget, in the end, the very guy who brought Ra in walked out on his patio one day and just blew his brains out. I mean, after
Yeah.
going into deep
Right.
depression and all that, right? I mean, it's
Right.
graphic, but excuse me, if he received
All right.
enlightenment, right? Sorry, I guess it was obviously not doing anything for him, right? So what we need isn't really a cosmic sorting machine. I think what we need is an embodied remembering of what we are. We're not here to be harvested. We're here to thrive in community and in communion with all humanity, be present like the Bodhisattva, and to actually, through our own unique pretenses of high merit, play with them, experience beauty, share joy, share truth, and connect together to flourish. So that's
Right.
kind of where I'm coming from. I know it's a radical departure from the idea of the void and needing to get out of here,
Okay.
but
It's
isn't
fine, but
this
we need to move on. So
we
Penny,
need to
what do you
move
think?
on. Yeah. So I mean, that's it. My timer's on 10 minutes. I'm done. I hand it over to you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. All right. So the question is, what is enlightenment, and how might one know if they are enlightened? And so I'm going to say a couple of things, but I'm going to start by saying you reach enlightenment in stages. And if you have a sudden experience of enlightenment, you still have to go through those stages afterwards. They are stages of integration and development. So you can say there's all kinds of talk about, oh, I can get into alpha, I can get into theta, or I can get into gamma. That's not enlightenment. True enlightenment is the ability to begin to take in enough energy to generate light, period. And when you can't generate that light, then you haven't ignited that enlightenment process. And that is
So what does that mean? Generate light? How do you generate light?
your body literally generates, you begin to light up like a light bulb. The first thing that happens is that there's a huge expansion of your energy field, and the energies moving through it are much higher in frequency. Or let's say it this way, you don't lose the old frequencies, you just have a whole bunch more at a much higher rate, much higher voltage.
Sure.
There's a bigger field around you, and that field is the result of the current moving through. So in the first 10 years after the Kundalini experiences that I had, light bulbs would pop when I walked by. I could not wear a watch. Computers crashed constantly. It was such a nuisance. Sometimes my vehicle wouldn't start. It was brand new. And other times it wouldn't start for me. But if I walked away and had somebody else start it, it would start just fine. And so there's all kinds of electromechanical problems that occur. Those are signs that the enlightenment process has started. So let me say it again. Enlightenment is the ability to hold enough energy throughput to begin to generate light. So, and most people's field is about 16 feet in diameter. A lot of people in the world today are only 8 or 10 feet in diameter, but the norm is 16 to maybe 20. But when enlightenment begins, that expands to 60 feet and beyond. So, couple things. When enlightenment begins, you enter into states of consciousness in which you cannot differentiate between yourself and everything around you. These are moments of total oneness, and there's no mistaking those. There are also what are called in the ancient language beatific, where you're beatified. That's another sign that the enlightenment process is beginning. And really, you can think of enlightenment as the evolutionary development of the human being that is normal and expected unless you do something to arrest your development. So once you have one, even just one of those enlightenment, of those beatified states, of those states of total oneness, everything about your consciousness changes. and it doesn't go back. And what changes is that you are in light, you see light around everything. That was the first thing. I kept thinking there was something wrong with my eyes. The light was just this glaring light around everybody and everything. And that is part of the illumination. And those are accompanied by what I'll call states of mystic awareness, where you see something or know something that's coming or something that is important for you to know. It might not be a universal mystic state, but it's important for you because each one of us is unique. So the second thing is that all of the meanings in your life change. One single experiment of this or experience of this beatified state or this state of illumination or oneness, your consciousness changes, and that all of your meanings change. That's really a difficult stage. It opens up the stage of crying, and you will cry typically for a couple years at least. Eventually you'll get control of that crying again, but some people never do. They weep at everything because they're so sensitive. So as meanings change, the job you had that you worked so hard for, that you went to college for 4 years or 8 years or 12 years, might mean nothing. The woman or the man that you married might all of a sudden mean nothing. Why? Because you have grown past them. So other things change. Your perception of color changes tremendously. Your appreciation of beauty, you see beauty in everything. That is accompanied by a sense of goodness and love, deep appreciation for what is good in the world, and sort of a moving away from anything that is not good. You don't spend a lot of time pounding on or trying to get rid of what is not good. You just don't give it any attention because the focus is on goodness. Consciousness deepens and it expands greatly. And now you're seeing what is motivating people, what's behind the curtain, where's that going? What is the pattern that's involved here? All sorts of changes in your consciousness as it deepens and expands. And genius appears. That is just a common thing. Your energy frequency, your frequency ID changes. And your choices begin to change because now you are no longer the same person. So it isn't something that you can logically fight either. I fought for 17 years to make the whole thing go away and finally caved and thought, this is, I got a message from my people saying, look, this is normal. This is how the human is supposed to develop, and you're fighting it all the way. Stop. So how do you know if you're moving toward enlightenment or getting into enlightenment? You'll have sometimes voices that you hear. Sometimes you will see a moment or a flash of light. That's typically going to be lightning occurring in your field of energy. Other times you will see light in your head or all around you. Close your eyes and it's lighter there than it is out in the world. The world is very dark. And then there's a very sexual, rapturous feeling. And I'm going to say this, people often go, oh, but you are always turned on. It becomes a natural state. And that sexual energy, Dr. Levengood did some experiments in the lab in which he got somebody to masturbate and be hooked up to the machine. And she almost blew the machine right off the bench. Okay, so what happens in a sexual experience is that there's a huge throughput of energy, and you have to learn to hold that. That's the whole basis of tantric training. You hold that energy, and that energy is what begins to generate light. So there's that. Couple more things. I mentioned the tears of joy. There's an awareness of an infinite presence. around you that you can communicate with, and it communicates with you immediately. And so you're never alone. There's a sense of wonder and awe at the beauty, the magnificence of this place. There are visions, you'll have visions, you'll know what's coming, you'll know the truth when people speak. There'll be this truth meter in you that says, mm-mm. There'll be wisdom, courage, and strength that you never had before. And like Frank said, and I have often said to my students, you know, I go to the way station, which is where people go after death. They're all lined up to come back here. So that whole idea of getting out of here, going someplace better, that's not happening. This is the place to be. This is a magnificent reality system. It's rich in form and color and light and sound, and the sensory development that has been developed to be able to appreciate and enjoy that. You don't find that in every reality system. So that's what enlightenment amounts to. And as you proceed through stages of development, you come to this place of absolute, utter silence within until you want to make a move. And it's a choice. Just like Frank said, you begin to choose, what are you creating? And you create very deliberately. So I'll stop there because we're running out of time.
Well, thank you very much. That was very informative, very helpful. Again, we've got time for about one more round here. I appreciate particularly Penny, you talking about what the characteristics are of this whole thing. Frank, did you want to add to that at all?
Well, I mean, it's very, very nice to hear your breakdown, Penny, of the actual physical sensations that people have, because I did not go in that direction at all. It reminded me when I heard you talking about a book that very impressed me a lot. I found it about, I think, 10 years ago or something. It's called After the Enlightenment, The Laundry. Written
Yeah.
by an author called Jack Kornfield. Have you heard of that guy?
Uh-huh.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful book because it talks about this exact thing when people have this amazing transcendental experience, usually separate from their normal circle of friends or family, and then they return to the normal world.
Yeah.
And then how do they cope with that, right? So the whole book is all about that. It's a bunch of short stories, but the approach that I wanted to focus on was exactly that kind of, what do you do afterward, right? Because every one of us is going to have these periods where we have these states of enlightenment, and some of them are going to be far more profound than others. Some of them are going to be with the help of entheogens. There's different ways to go about it, but I think the nutshell of it really is the idea that it's how to apply it with conscious action, right? To remember that you're not on a trap here on earth. You're actually here on a temple in a way. And if you look at it that way, and you look at the ability that you have senses. I like what you said, Penny, about the senses, like just the complexity of the human sensory. We don't even really even, I think most of us have dumbed our senses down for the most part. I mean, I remember one of the first things that I noticed when I changed my diet is that I began tasting things that I didn't taste for a long time, because I'd clogged my system up with with things that were not natural. And fortunately, I did it at an early enough stage in my life so that I cleaned that up. But when you clean the vessel, part of enlightenment is also to be sensitive to what your body is feeling, to know
Oh,
that if you're eating something which is giving you power, giving you nourishment, right? Just like when your actions are giving others nourishment, in a way, when you are bringing, through this idea of your pretenses in a playful way, you're helping others to see themselves through you. And just like, when you eat properly, you're helping your body see itself correctly as well. So I would just add those couple of points to what you said. I think it was beautiful.
okay. I just have to make a quick comment. I do that. I call that being sassy, messing with people. Let's see
Yeah,
what happens,
exactly. Let's see what happens and play with it, right?
Yeah, right. We don't play.
Good. So Penny, if you don't see light, does that mean that you're not enlightened?
It doesn't mean that you're, that you're a dummy. It just means that that
No,
process hasn't
no.
started within you.
I didn't say it well. Let's say you have a lot of the other characteristics that you described, but you
Yes.
don't see light. So what, or at least you don't relate to that. Then what does
Okay.
that mean?
That means that you may have some other sensitivity that is developing. It could be hearing, it could be feeling, it could be tasting, it could be smelling.
Or or colors, right? Like seeing colors in a certain vivid way.
Yeah. We are multisensory beings, and any one of those can be the doorway. But light is the most common. And eventually, if you if you start working to become enlightened and you meditate, and all that stuff, eventually you will begin to see light if you keep at it. But that's not, that isn't something that's a necessity. What light does is bring you to all those other qualities that you're talking about.
So do you glow in the dark?
Yes, you do. Absolutely. I've got some
You need
photos.
no night light required.
When you're fully enlightened, no, you don't need any electricity at all. You light up the room just by being in it, and it lights it up for everyone else as well.
Well, that's interesting.
The planet's glowing. The whole planet's glowing. I mean, it's just everything glows. I mean, they've done that. Everyone knows Kirlian photography, right? So that is showing us what our senses, what our eyes with limited bandwidth are not seeing.
Now, I can see that. I can see those lights. That's one of the things that I do is look at what's happening with somebody's lights. That's just, that's one of the things that bothered me in the beginning is what's all that? But we actually look like a little cosmos. There's twinkling, flashing lights, there's shooting stars, there's plasma, there's lightning, there's all kinds of stuff happening just in each individual field around the body.
Well, thank you both very much. Fascinating conversation and very helpful too. And we'll be back, in a couple of weeks, and we'll do this again. And for all of those of you who are watching us, we really appreciate you being with us. We get wonderful kind of responses, not only the ones that we talk about here, but many others from people who find what we're talking about important and provocative. We come to you from the Arlington Institute, little think tank that I put together about over 35 years ago, and we're located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, just about 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore, and in the Appalachian Mountains, away from the Beltway of Washington and that pollution and all that stuff. What we do here at the Arlington Institute is we're in the business of facilitating the transition to a new world. And that's why we have these talks and these discussions, because this is all about how do you navigate the way forward into this space where we haven't ever experienced before. And so it really requires us to think about these things and to generate new perspectives and new possibilities such that we can effectively participate as best we can in this amazing kind of transition. And so you can find out a lot about what we're doing at the arlingtoninstitute.org. One of our programs is Transition Talks, and every month we feature a speaker from somewhere around the world who comes and talks about some major issue. Greg Braden will be with us here on the 31st of May. And Penny Kelly's coming in June. And Frank Jacob will be with us in September. And we've got a whole bunch of other marvelous and wonderful people who are coming. And we live stream it as well as have a big party there here in Berkeley Springs with dinners. And we just initiated a new aspect. On Friday night before, we're going to go to a local bar and we're going to have happy hour. And so everybody gets a chance to meet each other and so on. And so we're looking for community kind of writ large here. But there's a lot of other interesting things we're doing. And so we'd encourage you to take a look at the website and then come back and be with us in a couple of weeks because we'll do this all over again. So be well and see you next time.
Yeah. Take care, you guys. Love you. Thank you.
Always an honor, guys. Take care. Look forward to our next discussion as always.